especially I feel that from the impacts of COVID-19 around the world. And so in my experience, to be able to have a strong supportive network of women to be able to support is wonderful. But I think it's really about having this mix of inclusive gender diversity that really adds value to how we understand the market today, as well as how we hope to be able to strive to solve a problem much bigger than what we're doing in our own organizations. I really love what Taizir mentioned. And sometimes that really means encompassing a much bigger purpose to why you're doing what you're doing, and which will reflect how you are doing it. So, one of my favorite quotes that really resonated with me when people ask me about being an entrepreneur, I really love it that there's starting to be conversations about, women are not being fairly treated during certain decision making. And at the same time, even more so, when you're working on social impact where people think that doing good is a cute topic, a fluffy topic in which people feel is just the cherry on top. I actually want to prove that there is more substance to what we're trying to do, and a lot much harder than a lot of us have thought before jumping into running this. And so I would like to leave with, one of my favorite quotes, which is from Edward Everett Hale, is that I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do. So I feel that if we can be there to support each other and being able to stand up for other genders in the decision-making process towards something that would be better for our global community, I think what I would like to see that would bring greater equality into this space is respect. Respect for each other and the environment at deeply personal levels. It requires bold leadership because I believe that culture is set at the top. So it is crucial that it is strategically placed as a part of your fundamental values of how things are run in your organization, regardless of which sector of the industry that you're in. And so I would like to call everyone to please have courage, despite all obstacles, that we should still take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliza, for the beautiful presentation and such wonderful thoughts. I mean, it's been really, thank you so much. In fact, two things that we can bind together from both the presentation is that we really need to come out from the comfort zones to take the extra step, for making, for women to come out, to take up newer ventures, newer challenges, and also help younger people, younger women to follow the trajectory. Beautiful, thank you so much. Our next speaker, Neha Bush, Director, Prava. Welcome, Neha. Neha has been really working hard to put this panel together for the conference today. Neha is the Director of Prava, an ex-CEO of Prava, a leading Delhi-based NGO that works on adolescent and youth development and youth-centric development with and among Indian youth. Neha works to build alliances with other sectors, such as the academic institutions, community groups, government, and corporations. She has engaged with different UN agencies, as well as several national and international fora to advocate for youth development and youth-centric development programs and approaches. Neha brings with her expertise of designing and facilitating cutting-edge interventions across diverse stakeholders and across multiple focus areas, including adolescent and youth development. She's a core member of the Prava Senior Design and is also on the board of different adolescent and youth engaging organizations and mentors several young social entrepreneurs across the country. Welcome, Neha. Request you to present. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Appa, and thank you so much to everybody who's here. A special thanks to Sunish and the entire Gender Park team and the IGCE group and the government of Kerala for just organizing such a wonderful space for actually an ecosystem to be created. It's a very, very apt place where this panel is also situated, because it's a beautiful opportunity to meet people from across different sectors and creating that space to be able to have conversations, which I think are the building blocks of creating any ecosystem. And I'm going to speak, so I had some things planned, but I know that Taizir and Aliza have already spoken about some of them. So I'm going to just build on that, bringing from my own experiences of having worked in different collaborator spaces. And these are drawn largely from my experiences in Prava, where we work, our value of how we create scale, and we say scale with soul, is actually through building partnerships and building ecosystems. Now that for us is critical to create sustainability. When we work nationally, we don't go out to work independently. We actually partner with local grassroots organizations and work with them, which is where there's always a beautiful exchange of capacities. There's magic which comes in because there's local knowledge, there's strengths there, and then there is our strength, and we build those together. And this is work both in the space of gender, where we work with, there are 7 organizations who have come together and have for the past 5 years been running this program called My Life Mere Faisle, which means My Life, My Decisions, which is to push back the age of marriage. It's working on early and child marriage across 11 locations in the country. This is a coalition of 7 organizations. Change Rooms, are young early stage social entrepreneurs program, which again works on developing capacities of the young social entrepreneurs and to build communities such that they are able to influence and build local, national, and international ecosystems. Other than that, we went on, and my experience comes from working with Community, the Youth Collective, which was incubated by Prava in partnership with the Ratan Tata Trust, which is a coalition of 100 adolescent and youth engaging organizations from across India. And the Youth Collective, which is Community, the Youth Collective, has gone on to incubate a coalition called Varta League Coalition, which is actually a coalition of 170 plus cross-sectoral organizations and individuals who are working towards taking youth-centric development and placing it into the center rather than let it remain on the margins, which is where we believe it is currently. Now, why did I say all of this, right? The reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people have often asked us that working in coalitions and working towards building ecosystems is really hard work, right? There's so much change that needs to be brought in, and you can actually work as an organization or as an independent individual and create the change in your own space. But our experience, like Taizir has said, is that it is more sustainable, more long-lasting, much better quality, right? Much better quality, because clearly the ideas and the experiences that come in, the diversity that comes into that and creating that is just absolutely magical. Having said that, and this is my favorite thing to say because I love magic. The beauty of it is magic on the stage looks like everything's perfect and it's just happened like that. But actually, behind that, maybe years and years and years of practice, of working on it, of making mistakes, of bringing on collaborators, letting go of collaborators, coming back again, growing up, all of those sort of things and bringing it together. And ecosystem building is like that. We know that they are complex, they're difficult. They are difficult also because it's not just about individuals that are involved. It is also about the systems and the organizations and the institutions that are involved. So they bring their own universe and dynamics with it, and it's ever changing. So at no point can we say, the ecosystem is built, no more work needs to be done. It's an everyday making and breaking down work. It happens through every interaction that we have as individuals, as organizations, as institutions, cuts across non-profits, schools, at least in my sector, the media, the government, it goes across all of these spaces. So it's hard work. And it requires for one to really, really let go of one's ego. You cannot do it with an ego of, oh my God, that person said that to me, or, oh, we tried that last time and it didn't work and I'm not going to go back. Because the reality is, the ecosystem exists. It will have an impact whether you engage with it or not. So if we are not engaging with it, it is still having an impact. It's possibly creating barriers. It's possibly going in a direction we don't want it to go. But it is going to make a difference. If we start engaging with it proactively, then perhaps the chances are that we'll be able to influence it to move in the direction that we really do want. So the first thing that comes in is we have to take ownership. We have to let go of our ego. We have to be willing to make it work. The second thing, and I think both Aliza and Taizi both talked about this, there needs to be a vision. There needs to be an alignment in purpose, which requires conversations. And it requires, as is often the case, an ability to build relationships with people that we don't necessarily agree with, right? Who are not necessarily like us, or institutions who don't feel like they're naturally aligned, right? And therefore it requires, because we often go into spaces with an agenda of, let me influence their agenda. Can we get them to align with us? But the reality is alignment is a two-way process. So we cannot influence without being willing to be influenced ourselves. It just doesn't work. So there's a give and take, and both need to happen together. And yes, having our non-negotiables in place in terms of what is it that we are not willing to let go of, and having conversations which go beyond just, can we agree to this process or not, but actually going underneath that to the values, starting to build common ground from what are the alignments in the values, how do we understand them, building those conversations, and remembering that these relationships are again both institutional but also individual. It requires for us to show up in our full presence, not just our agendas. So being able to bring that together, I have found, has been extremely critical. The other piece is what Aliza talked about, learnability. The ability to constantly learn and unlearn is so critical in this process, because the ecosystem is built with exchanges within an element of that system, but also with the real world. So it's constantly evolving and changing, and we need to be able to be responsive, we need to be able to be light, we need to be able to move. And sometimes that means, as it did in the case of Prava, that it may require different vehicles to engage with different parts of the ecosystem for it to come together. So Prava as an organization has its strength in design and facilitation, can work and does work with young people directly, with organizations on organizational development, program development, people development. But we knew that if we wanted to reach out to the policymakers, to the media, to be able to tell the stories, that's not our strength. And as a structure, we were not built as an organization to be able to do that. We were not that light-footed. You know, we were all sort of wanting to go into the depth of design and all of that. And so Community, the youth collective, which was more than Prava's voice, which is 100 voice strong, right? 100 organizations from different parts of the country was what was needed. And therefore, it requires a different structure, a different way of working, and a different vehicle to launch it. And therefore, as social entrepreneurs, and remembering that, therefore, that in order to influence an ecosystem, diversity of players is required. Diversity of ways is required in order to be able to do that effectively. The other part of it is that working with an ecosystem requires a purpose, requires a certain set of values and principles that we want to follow. It requires a structure. It requires a structure and a set of processes, because to bring people together, right, and say, let's collaborate, doesn't necessarily result in collaboration, because we don't really know. Everybody is approaching it from a different space. So somebody has to take the initiative to hold the space. Somebody will need to play the role of the facilitator and the holder of bringing together all of these elements to be able to make it work across sectors. This person would need to have strong capacities for empathy, which means an understanding of the individuals and their universes and their organizational universes and their realities. What would work? What can they do? What can they not do? Right? What would be non-negotiables for them? Because to pick up something which is a non-negotiable for one of the partners is a recipe for disaster, because you know that's not what your starting point should be. And so sometimes coalitions and ecosystem building, the spaces, they require years and years of engagement, and therefore cannot be bound by a project. A project in a short burst may influence it for a little while, but sustainable ecosystem building will just happen for years. And we know that through the experiences of the gender movement in India. It has evolved consistently. So many different people at so many different levels, so many institutions at so many different levels are working constantly day in and day out to make this happen. It has been happening for decades now, and we have still not arrived. So this is continuous work with a longer term perspective in mind that we need to have. This requires, therefore, the ability to co-create. The ability to co-create is something that requires also, therefore, the ability to look at things from multiple viewing points. So being able to walk and sort of look through the lenses of the different stakeholders and being able to understand that, and then how do we co-create and make something happen? What's in it for each of the individuals? What of their agendas will also get met? And that has to be set up together in order for us to be able to move effectively. And of course, it requires resources, right? Now, not just financial resources. The Varta Leap Coalition, interestingly, is an amazing example where it's been running for over a year now with multiple products, cutting edge products coming out, 2 sets of products already pilot launched, being now moving across the country. And it's pro bono. Everybody has given pro bono time to it. 170 plus, right? Not a joke. Across UN agencies, across government organizations, across NGOs, young people, students, all of them are giving their time pro bono because they are finding that they are getting something out of it as well. And there is an embedded vision. And there is flexibility within that to try different things and experiment and make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. So these are just some of the examples of some of the things that we've discovered are needed. And for an organization, it means the ability to remember that it will require extra effort over and beyond just what our programming is. So it requires a dedication and an interest and an alignment with a purpose. The other part of this ecosystem, therefore, for us is that we work with young people so that we are able to create an ecosystem within that ecosystem. We know that these young people, if we work on, and like Aliza said, there are a set of values, the leaders that we are working with, young people that we know will go on to take on decision-making spaces or run different places across communities, nationally, internationally, locally, village level, are people then who have these capacities to be able to interpret the world, take value-based stances, carry the values of equity, of gender justice, the values that we talk about in our constitution, in our preamble, and are able to then act with courage on those, while including other people, while reaching out and taking people along, and recognizing, therefore, that what appears to be conflicts are actually opportunities to create that change, and recognizing that change of any kind will never be smooth. It will always create friction. And that is where the community that both Azir and Aliza talked about is so critical to hold up and to sustain that pushback that will come as we try and create this mindset shift, policy shift, legal shifts, all sorts of shifts to create a stronger and a more conducive ecosystem. And every individual who goes in will need to be acting on it. It can't just be one person's agenda or one organization's agenda, which is why all of our work is about building these capacities in young people to be able to go and create these enabling ecosystems in whichever communities and spaces that they are in, locally as well as moving up, and then interconnecting between them so that they are constantly learning, sharing, and growing alongside. So I'm going to pause here, and I look forward to the different questions that sort of come in to take it forward. because this is just such a vast topic. But thank you so very much for allowing me to share some of my own examples. And I'll just stop by saying that it requires resilience, which has been a word that we've all become so familiar with during the pandemic. Resilience because sometimes the biggest changes are just not visible for years at end. It takes time for them to show up. So it's important to have our indicators as process-based indicators and not just outcome and output indicators when we are doing this work of building ecosystem and placing that. So yeah, thank you so very much. And I'm going to pause right here. Back to you, Appa.
Thank you, Neha. It's been really for putting things in perspective. And most important, I would say that how crisis actually destructs, the movement that's already been created. But then also you rightly said, as also pointed out by the other presenters, that ecosystem is not a stagnant, and when we keep aspiring for sustainability, it is not something that we reach there, but every day we'll have to work towards it, put in our efforts, build networks, bring in more experiences, tell and retell our stories. So the next story will be told from a very young social entrepreneur we have with us, Diana Reyes from El Salvador. Based from El Salvador, Central America, No Limits Foundation, a non-profit organization that works towards inclusion of people with disabilities. Diana has been closely working with this organization at various levels. Welcome, Diana. Over a decade, she has achieved various experiences of collaboration and leadership of corporate communication projects, social enterprises, and organizational development strategies at the regional level. She integrates her professional activities with active participation in community development projects and vulnerable sectors activism. Her most recent experience includes the management of the sustainability and organizational communication development of a major retail industry and financial services holding in Panama. Request you, Diana, to present your Diana Reyes.
Thank you very much, Appa, for this brief introduction. I'm about to say everything has been said right, so maybe we can go home and just do it. Just kidding. I'm very excited, and I first want to thank this opportunity that I consider very important to share experiences precisely that we have had from this side of the world. I don't know if anyone is familiar to where El Salvador is. We're a small country in Central America. And so good morning, good afternoon, or even good night to everyone. It's very early in El Salvador, and I just took this picture that you're seeing on the presentation. No, I'm just kidding. I'm credit to my husband that he kindly shared this picture with me. But I wanted to show you how El Salvador looks now. And you know what? I wanted to tell my story, but I feel that I need to tell my story through the eyes of others. So then you might know what a bumpy, not cute, not sweet journey social entrepreneur's life can be. In El Salvador, as in the world, being a woman can involve discriminatory behaviors from the moment we are born, but being a woman with a disability has a double discrimination effect that is not easy to face, and this is what I'm going to address today. I have decided to take these few minutes to expose 3 best practices that we believe are redefining the role and impact of women. 3 things that, from our experience, are best practices to create conducive ecosystems for sustainable initiatives. So as I tell you, I'm going to tell my story or my journey through the journey of others that have been inspiring me and everyone in the organization that we work with. And first, I want you to meet Griselda Celedon. First point that I want to address is leading by example. I want to take this first few minutes to share the story of this woman who for sure has no idea that I'm talking about her, but she has inspired me about the important role that women can play in changing the course of history. Griselda Celedon is the living example of of those who overcome obstacles. Let me tell you something about her. She founded the only educational complex for deaf people, ranging from kindergarten to high school. And according to official statistics in our country, in El Salvador, there's 88,000 people with hearing disabilities. Imagine what that means, having only one school with these characteristics. But at this moment, my central point is to highlight the importance of giving relevance and showcasing to people with disabilities who have had a relevant role in the changes in our society, even more if they're women. This requires being brave enough to just keep going against the current. And I'm not going to go much deeper on this, but in 2009, David Reyes became the first person with a disability in the history of our country to become a member of the Legislative Assembly. He has been in the Congress for 12 years now. He got in with very strong ideas on how to make visible changes in the way our country's law approaches disability. And I have to say, he's my brother, whom I'm very proud of, not only on his impact in the Congress and the visible changes he got there to make, but the way he has impacted on other people's life, even though he might not notice. By 2018, Aileen Romero was the first woman with a disability to become a congresswoman. I believe this has to do with David preparing the ground prior to her entry. And I'm not sure about the statistics at the global scale, but I'm sure that very few people with disabilities can reach such positions, especially in Latin America. Teaming up, even though they're not from the same political party, can be key to many initiatives moving forward. In the second point, I want to talk about and highlight how important it is to strengthen legislative frameworks for inclusion. In El Salvador, as in the rest of the world, two of the great challenges to overcome in the workplace has always been to eliminate the existing wage gap between men and women who perform the same job functions, and also have to close ranks in the face of discrimination that in general people with disabilities live with, including the salary aspect. Thanks to the approval of this reform, the labor code now establishes equal pay for men, women, and people with disabilities, and equal opportunities for promotion in their workplaces. I don't mean to say that this is the way how you solve everything, but I think it's a big step to make some regulations about and make some reforms about the labor code that now establishes this kind of things. And for example, I have to mention that 3 of the provisions that are regulated by these reforms are: first, equal pay when similar functions are carried out in the same company; promotion processes without discrimination where women and people with disabilities who work in the company can participate; drastic penalties for employees who commit acts of discrimination in terms of salary; promotion opportunities for women or people with disabilities. As I speak, finally, for my presentation, the video is in Spanish, so I'm going to allow myself to play it. You see this person, this woman who is observing a big building. Sorry about this. So you see this person that she's waiting to get into an interview. In this video, we observe this woman. I'm going to play it so you can see how it goes. In the video, we observe this woman who attends to her job interview in a building, of course, not accessible to her. A building without the facilities that anyone would say are reasonable. Anyway, she manages to get to the office where she has her interview. She hands over her resume and waits her turn to begin. You can see the face of this guy, his interviewer. He first might not be open to consider a person with a disability for this position. Actually, in the video, he's saying, maybe there has been a confusion, I'm sorry. But you know what? She clearly states that she has the abilities. She needs to go and get that position. So it is clear that even his assistants, as you saw her face, is embarrassed by the way he acts. And this final scene goes with the closing messages that the real limitations are the excuses. So if you see, this is a scene that can go about any country as you make this pair as being a woman and being a woman with a disability. So the third point I want to address in closing my participation is regarding how we, from Fundación Sin Límites, that in English is No Limits Foundation, how we engage with the private and public sectors to address these issues. How we did it in Fundación Sin Límites, bottom line, we got the job done for them. Together with Fundemas, that is a business organization, people with disabilities and public institutions, we created this guide to employment inclusion for people with disabilities, and we included the practical manual for certification of people with disabilities. This is a very specific theme here in El Salvador. Companies don't really know how to enroll people with disabilities in the company. So as I said, we got the job done for them. Now companies don't need to go and think about how to do it. They have the capacity and ability to get them and just put it in practice. In this guide, we presented from how to integrate people at the administrative level to how to integrate them with the rest of the colleagues with whom they are going to work with. We even created a phone guide with the point person itself, so companies have not to do a lot of work when inclusion knocks at their door. Collaboration, as Taisir mentioned, is key and a game changer, and this has been key for our organization as well. And in closing my participation, I just want to emphasize that there's no formula, and as the previous panelists have stated, it takes a lot of persistence to be successful. But every chance I get to hear the progress of others, I feel very inspired to continue, you know, like for example, this presentation, this panel, this opportunity to share with you all, I feel very inspired to keep learning, as Alisa and Nisa had said. I see Alisa, Taisir, Apa, Ratzia, Lisette, and everyone in our IVLP generation is that very inspiring just to keep going. Didn't mean to only mention ladies' name. So guys, thank you for also inspiring us. Please keep sharing those stories on your social media. Keep inspiring me as you all have done for me today and since the day we first met. So thank you all. I'm very open to chat with everyone. If anyone needs to reach out, there's my email as well. And I'm very open to share experiences and go along with you all in this journey that we are all facing.
Hello. Thank you, Dinah. Thank you so much. And yeah, the key you have pointed out, it's leading by example, law enforcement, a legal framework, regulatory framework is very, very important. And the third, like pointed out by everyone, is the key again for building a sustainable ecosystem is engage, engage, and engage. So I will just take 2 minutes for my closing remarks, and then we open the house for discussion, question and answers. So one thing, thank you all of you. I mean, that's been really, really a learning and relearning process, and all of you have said that when, if we actually are talking about ecosystem, the underlying factor is that however talented and endowed one is, one cannot, not a single person, and of course not entrepreneurs, can make it alone. They need support, both from internal and external sources, from the family members, institutions, and governments. Otherwise, it cannot take off. The ecosystem does talk about it, as Taisir Azala pointed out very clearly, how it is very, very important for long-term businesses, for sustainability. Another important thing which has also been pointed out by Neha is working with different genders, and even Eliza, thank you so much for bringing that in. It is very, very important when we are talking about a gender-neutral ecosystem. How do we bring in the experiences of different genders and build on the differences and build on the diversity so that we keep growing, adding, subtracting, and help us build a collective without forgetting the contribution of the individual, of course. And thirdly, I would like to point out the most important aspect of it is when we are talking about ecosystem, it is all about collaborations, networking, and of course sharing our experiences, because the more we tell our stories, the more we share our learnings, it enriches the entire process. And I think since this conference is taking the forward for building a policy environment, it is a very important learning from the panel here today, that it has to be a platform for diverse experiences across different societies, different social groups, and of course learnings the pandemic has given us. How it impacts different genders differently is something which is a key takeaway. And yes, for building an ecosystem, we really need to engage, collaborate, and grow, and relearn, and cross-learn. With these words, I would like to open the house, open for discussion. Any question and answers? I would really request if you can address it to the panelists with their names. That will be easier for them to also reply. If we have any questions in the...
If there's any question, please raise your hand or raise yourself so that the microphone can reach you. I think a lot of ground has been covered, that there's no more existing questions as of now, looks like it. But yeah, if you would continue to, like to continue speaking, and we can just wait for a couple of questions as they
Yeah, do
come
we
up
have
with
something in the chats?
I
Online?
don't have access to that. Do we have any questions popping up in the Q&A segment in the Zoom session? None. If there were any, they would have reached me. So yeah, I'm assuming there are none.
There are none? I think another important thing which
I think there is one question.
Okay, yeah.
I think there's one question by Mridul, and it's not in the chat. Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Who's it? Ma'am, is it possible for you to, Ms. Neha, is it possible for you to read out the question if you're able to see it?
I will. It's not in the chat. There's a lady, Mridulji, who wants to actually share the question. Yeah, Mridulji, she's unmuted.
I think I've unmuted myself.
Yes, you have. We can hear you. Please go.
Okay. No, I was just thinking, hearing all the presentations, what struck me was, in fact, real social business, in the sense that, whether it's on the educational front or the disabilities or, the adolescents or child marriage stopping, all of them are, what we do want to understand as social. But the thing is, my question then is, the question which was asked in the earlier section, how is financing done for these? Because obviously you can't ask these people to give you even a token contribution. You can't. So how is the financing? So that means forever you go on depending on grants and donations and things like that. That seems to me a little worrying. Do we have to do things like that, which is a way in which we can actually, manage to make some, what should I say, to become self-reliant rather than depending all the time on grants. I mean, this is a question to everybody, because I thought all of you all had, given us very interesting examples of what is social really, but how to make it business, that is the thing. Is my question clear? Is my question clear? Okay.
I couldn't completely hear that.
Neha, did you hear the question?
Yeah, so the question Mridulji asked was basically sharing that, we've talked a lot about social enterprise. We've given some examples of the different ways in which the social aspect of it, has been talked about. But therefore, when we look at financing of that, then typically these are financed through grants, through fundraising efforts, etc. And the members of the ecosystem may not be able to contribute financial resources themselves because they cannot afford it as well. So how do we bring about a self-sustainability in that aspect? And she requested that we have all the panelists sort of engage with it because all of us spoke about it. So maybe somebody else can, Aliza wants to start off, go for it.
I think it's definitely a problem that a lot of people face when they're starting a social enterprise. Yes, of course, you have to look back and start reflecting first. Is there a clear business model to what you're doing? So with a clear business model, then you start to understand the revenue model of how you will be generating revenue. And so I feel that a lot of the time people think that asking for grant or fundraising, they want to be more self-sufficient, but not all social issue or social enterprise or even social impact organization and nonprofit organizations would always have a business model. Sometimes a lot of the social issues that you're working on has no revenue generating model other than fundraising and asking for grant. And we shouldn't feel ashamed of it because, a lot of the work that we do might need that. With what the platform that I'm doing, of course I would want to be able to support a self-sustaining social enterprise, but not all organizations can be self-sustaining. Sometimes their key focus is to solve that specific problem, not to divert its attention to try to find revenue. So being a social enterprise is basically trying to run a charity and run a business at the same time. And sometimes it just doesn't work for some organizations. And sometimes it's just being very honest with yourself. What is it that would get the work done to solve the problem in which you are solving right now? So for me, as a social enterprise, I said that I want to dedicate myself to raise funds for other social organizations that might not have a revenue model. A lot of the time, nonprofit fall into the trap of wanting to produce little products, knick-knack souvenirs. And to be honest, if you don't have a team to do real product development, you're actually producing more waste, or actually products that people are buying just because they feel sorry or they feel sad and you sold a very sad story to somebody. The thing is, if you do not want to go to that route, maybe you can focus on more inspiring aspect to be able to pursue for grants and fundraising, which there is no shame to that at all. So on the other hand, if you are going to the revenue model, then you have to see what is it that you can continue to do from your core business that is not just an added up on top. And so it's not about just running a nonprofit organization. You can sometimes have different revenue generating activities, but is it something that you're doing on a daily basis? So I feel that, I'm more than happy to provide a more specific advice to your question, to understand more what is it that you do, so that if there is something that I can be of help, I'm more than happy to. But in terms of finding that revenue model, you have to see who is it that will be paying for it. Is it the person who cares about your issue, or is it somebody else who benefits from you actually solving a problem?
Thanks, Aliza. I think Mridulji wants to ask a follow-up question. Mridulji, you'll still have to unmute. Sorry, ma'am, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you actually clearly.
Yeah, Mridul ma'am is on mute.
On mute. Oh,
there you go.
No, I am not saying in terms of shame, not at all. I didn't mean that at all. What I meant was, is it possible to continue to expect grants every year? That's what I wanted to say. I'm not saying that, definitely not. It's a very good thing that you are doing, and whatever you can do with whatever you have, I fully appreciate it. My point was not of shame, not at all. My thing was, is it possible for you to expect a a regular grant, for instance, which will help you to keep running, maybe even to increase your reach. That's all I wanted to know.
Right. Thanks, Mridulji. Diana wanted, sorry, Appa, I seem to be, I can't see you, so.
Yeah, actually it was not very clear because of the sound quality. I think, yeah, it's clear now. So do we have another question from the audience?
Yes, if there's a question from the audience, yes, there's a gentleman.
Appa, I think Diana and I also wanted to just respond to Mridulji's question.
Sure. Before we go to the, yeah, please.
Yes.
Neha, would you like to go first?
Diana can go first. She's been waiting to
first.
speak. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, this is a very important issue that every organization faces. Particularly, we don't define as a social entrepreneur company, like a company itself. We call ourselves a foundation, so definitely we need grants, definitely we need to apply to many ways to get the money to get projects going. But you know what? I have seen, and if we have a time after the panel and everything, we can talk about this. As Alisa said, we have so many companies that have found, the swap or the key to change on that and get some services or delivering services as a foundation to companies. We actually did it for many years. We went to companies and talk about with the human resources people, and we said, hey, we want you to hire people with disabilities, but I understand you might not know how to do it, so we can offer a service and we can give you a series of talks and conferences, and we can bring people over and take your people going on the subject, so you can actually charge for those services because those are professional services. And maybe it has been a very small quantity it doesn't represent a big chunk of what we do, but you need to find a way to give services to companies. That's why I pointed out the fact that it's very important to engage with the private sector, because you always have to get together with other organizations to get your objectives and your goals going on. So definitely, I have many examples that I can share, not only by us, but many other foundations that, especially in a country that is very small like ours, and that it's very in much greater needs. I think many countries can say that, but I think El Salvador is a very small country. It has a lot of organizations, foundations, like institutions for help that have found a way to change and give services to companies to get some money for the projects they are running or the objectives that the organization is moving forward.
Thanks, Diana. And I think I'm just going to add to that. And before I add to that, I just want to say, I don't know, Mridulji, if you've been working in the sector, and I sense some degree of that frustration of also, going back to scratch and trying to raise resources, and I'm in the middle of that myself. So I understand that completely. Right? It is one of the most frustrating experiences. And recognizing, as I know, even in the way that you asked the question, you said that, some of these are issues which are not product-based innovations. They are actually about mindset shift, norm changing, and will take, eons for it to shift. And it's not, so therefore fundraising for it, it's not an easy thing to sort of put a price on it and say, here's a service, and we do that. And I think Diana has given some great examples. And a lot of us do sort of go down the consulting way and, creating some of these value-added products. We do have some examples of how, cooperatives and SCGs, etc., have functioned trying to raise their own things. But those are some of the examples which exist. But I think what I would also say is, I think that arena of grants and resources is changing. There are newer ways in which it's coming in, like impact bonds and whatnot, which is a very different model, very different system. And I think that one of the biggest gaps we have is not everybody who is working at the grassroots will actually ever have access or an understanding of these things. that access and that gap where the work is being done, so if you're not English speaking, you don't happen to belong to a particular class or a caste or have a social capital of a particular kind, we will never be able to access these. And that is reality. That is reality. In the past 1 year, in the work that I've been doing with social entrepreneurs, I cannot tell you the number of young people who have basically said, I cannot survive. I have to shut this and go into doing something else. And it's work which is needed. I think that is one of the key reasons why all of us need to work on the ecosystem that exists. What is it that we can do in terms of policy shifting where we look at social entrepreneurship not as product-based entrepreneurship alone? It's not about the ROI. How can we change that language? Can the return of an investment, that language itself, which looks at, there's got to be money coming back, be shifted? Is there another language that we can influence the ecosystem, the policymakers to say, listen, we need something else? Can we educate the investors and bring them on board in that ecosystem and say, be partners, come see what's happening? I don't have an idea, but since you seem to be speaking that language, can we bring you into the space and you tell us how we can make that happen, right? Because I also feel like this is not necessarily all of our strengths to come up with an alternate business model, so to speak, right? But there are people who do this. Can we bring them on board and say, you come in, you help us identify, how can we do this without compromising on our non-negotiables and on our values? What could be the potentiality? And I think that is an opportunity which through relationship building, through reaching out to people, and I think through bringing them on the ground, I think that's critical. I think sometimes because not all of us can tell a story so beautifully on paper or so beautifully just on a phone call. But I know in most cases when someone shows up and sees you in action, I think that's where it starts to, resonate. People will tell the story. I don't think I need to be the intermediary to the impact and the change and what's needed. If I can bring the relevant people to the space and say, can you guys talk? I think that might happen. And so it's still not a solution, Mridulji, to what you were saying. I think it's still going down that route. I think I am of the firm belief that there is a section of society which has the money and that they do need to invest it back in society. I think we need to figure out a good way in which that can be articulated, handled, and connected with one another, keeping in mind the diversity and access. And I think also very importantly, the values, because I also feel like it's not just issue-based. I might work on an issue, but I need to be aware of the intersectionality and the larger values at play that are operating and take stances based on that. So yeah, I think just that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appa, back to you. Thank you, Meghna.
One more question from the audience, yes.
Hello all. It's a wonderful presentation from all the panelists. I'm Thanuraj from Center for Public Policy Research in Kochi. Since the objective of this session was to understand sustainable entrepreneurs and to find problems, develop new ideas or implement relevant strategies, all the panelists were reflecting on sustainable non-profit. I get a feel like most of you are speaking on the representing non-profit organizations, or the sustainable entrepreneurship is nothing but non-profit. Correct me if I'm wrong. I was actually quite interested listening to Kalki in the morning. She said, I wish Bill Gates emerging from our community. So given that situation, my question is, what about the ease of doing business, economic freedom index, or you could also think about technology-enabled platforms, probably that will bring more social equity and social sustainability, and probably more people are interested and more access and affordability to those who are entering the entrepreneurship scheme. So could you reflect from your region, because you come from different regions, could you reflect from your experience how ease of doing business, how equity and economic freedom index relevant for women entrepreneurs, and how technology-enabled platforms probably will bring more social equity and social entrepreneurship?
I think it needs to be addressed by all of you.
If I can come in,
Yeah.
I think the previous response to the previous question was very similar. Would you like to add something? I think it's almost, they have answered this. I think this panel and this even from the morning, this has actually laid the foundation for the policy framework. And this binaries, you know, social, asocial, non-social, entrepreneur, we really need to build on it if you're looking forward for a policy framework, because until and unless we dwell upon the questions, very relevant questions, sir, I must say, but then we really need to dwell upon what are the things that we are looking at, you know, very different, separate, and what is it that brings us together for building a policy framework so that we can build a sustainable ecosystem, as we are calling it, or an ecosystem that will give equal space to all genders and particularly women. So I think it has raised very pertinent questions, and I would request the organizers to take note of it so that we can, you know, brainstorm more on these questions, and of course try to if not solutions, but work on it, you know, build on it so that we can build a narrative out of it. So thank you so much for the question. Would you like to add anything? Or if not, then maybe we can end the
yes, we can, if there's anything to be added.
If there's anything you want to add.
Need to do that?
Then thank you. I would like to thank all of you, and of course Divya for really coordinating and anchoring it well, and thank you all of you once again.
Thank you to all the panelists, and before we wrap up the session, I'd like to request Dr. PTM Sunish to come back on stage to present a memento to our chairperson, Dr. Aparajita Sharma. And along with that, special thanks to Eliza, Taizid, Neha, and Diana as well. Thank you for being here throughout and taking the questions and interacting with the other members of the panel as well.
Thank you, all. A great pleasure.
This is indeed my pleasure to my friends, all of you on board, Taizia, Alice, and Neha, and Diana. Thank you all. It's very insightful and really good experiences from your side. And thank you, participants. It's my privilege to give the memento to my colleague.
Thanks, Dr. Aparajita Sharma. Yes, please go ahead. A token of our appreciation for your presence here and for chairing the session. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. And thank you, ladies, for joining us once again. That brings us to the end of the plenary sessions and all the stage activities from here. But we know that in another 15 minutes, or what's the time now, 7:15? At 7:30 p.m. sharp, we have a fabulous performance lined up for you in the amphitheater area, which is right outside. It's a play based on Nothing by Mara Ived, directed by Ms. Lakshmi Krishnakumar. You really don't want to miss this one. It's a 1-hour play, starts sharp at 7:30 and will be wrapped up by 8:30. So after a quick round of networking, please head over to amphitheater area right outside. And that brings us to the end of the stage activities on day 1 at ICGE II. See you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. here. But for now, see you outside at 7:30. Bye-bye.